Other individuals and the media may also be audibly or visually recording this meeting. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during our committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to our agenda?
Yes, we have added delegation requests for a future meeting from Dr. Sally Palmer regarding the nutritious food basket report from a viewpoint of people receiving social assistance. Delegation request from Susan J. Creer respecting secondhand cigarette smoke in city housing Hamilton buildings. A delegation request from Mark Didziak respecting the nutritious food basket from the viewpoint of an Ontario Works recipient. And a delegation request from Myrtle Grieve, Canadian Federation of University Women respecting the nutritious food basket report. We also have an amendment to the content of the report, which is the Hamilton Climate Change Actions BOH 17037. That's item 7.2 on your agenda. That staff advised that a paragraph on page 4 has been amended to reflect the table below it. And we have an added discussion item, which is the potential local public health restructuring BOH 17034B.
All right, thank you. A motion to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Vanderbeek, seconded by Connolly. All in favor? Any declarations of interest? The minutes of the meeting of September the 18th, 2017. What is your wish? Moved by Councillor Skelly, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Carried. We have 6 delegation requests for future meetings. What is your desire? Move all. Moved by Aidan Johnson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have consent items 5.1 through 5.3. On 5.1, moved by Brenda Johnson, seconded by Councillor Green. All in favor? Carried. On 5.2, Councillor Green.
I appreciate the timing of this, as I'm sure some of you may have been getting the same calls we have around the rat response and just the trends that are generally happening here. I know that the feedback from my community is, they're feeling like this is a very recent and intense spike, an acute spike. And so it's good to know that we have a look at additional rat control resources for homeowners. So I'm happy to move it at the appropriate time and just thank staff for coming forward with this. It's something that's a good concern in our community.
Great, thank you. Councillor Connolly.
Yeah, I've had a lot of calls on rats in Upper Stony Creek in the last while, and it seems when construction is going on, rats go on. So I don't know if the construction is causing the rats to come out of their normal habitat and go into the communities, but I'm having a real problem with them. I had 2 calls yesterday, the houses beside each other, that they have rats. What do I do? How do I get rid of them, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope we're doing more than we normally do, because it seems to be getting to a point of no return. I've had 50 calls in the last 6 or 7 months, and a lot of people don't call, but the ones that call you have to take serious. So I'll talk to whoever has to be talked to see if I can get some more reinforcement there, and they might have already called, but I think I'd like to follow it up. So the rats are be getting a problem, and I don't know if it's in every area, but I know in the new development areas it seems to be manifesting itself. So I hope we can keep a really good eye on it and get it back into control. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and certainly I appreciate this report, very timely coming forward. And I know I've had several concerns and many calls, as well as Councillor Connolly says, with regards to rats this summer. Actually, started out, the last couple of years has been increasing. This has been the worst year, I have to say. And I do appreciate this, appreciate whatever information we can pass on to residents to protect themselves. And I try very hard to tell them, feeding of pets, no pet food outside, no water sources, etc. You got to eliminate all that. The trouble is when you have vegetable gardens, and I've had situations where the rats are actually going in and eating the vegetables in the vegetable garden. So that presents a huge problem. But one question I wanted to ask, Mr. Mayor, through you is, you mentioned target sewer baiting, and I did have an area that abuts a very large, and I know I had emailed Susan Harding-Cruz about it, abuts a large storm sewer that the city has. Would this have been an area that we would have done abating? Because nobody said that anything was done in that area, so I'm not sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Pearson. Given that you spoke to Susan Harding-Cruz about this specific case, Susan, perhaps you could respond. Certainly, we're working in concert with Public Works to bait sewers as appropriate when we get observable rat activity in a given area. But given the special sort of configuration here, I'll let Susan respond.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are normal procedures if we have rat complaints and if sewer baiting is considered. We have an inspector investigate. If we feel that the sewers may be contributing to the rat infestation, then we refer it to Public Works and make that request for it to be baited.
Councillor Pearson.
And I appreciate that. Is there any way that we can be kept informed as to areas in our ward that this may be done so that I can assist residents in knowing that something else is being done other than their own initiatives?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, we do get updates from Public Works from time to time about what areas have been baited and when, so we could share that back through, yes.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Or directly through Public Works, I imagine. You can
Whatever,
call
I
our
read all
Public
the
Works as well.
reports, so I
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've had a special town hall meeting item on this particular issue, and I want to thank public health staff for the thorough information they provided that I distributed throughout the ward. And it's really important to recognize one thing, that rats only are attracted based on two things: water sources and food sources. If you don't have those food or water sources in your backyard, rats are not going to come to your backyard. And I had a number of people who were incredibly aggressive and almost to a point they were violent that the city should be involved somehow because we're responsible. But when assessing their own backyard, bird feeders, an example, rats just love bird feed, and they will travel great distances to actually get it. And for whatever reason, it's their favorite food. But also, dog feces in their backyard, people that are feeding feral cats, okay, good intentions, bad outcome. So it really becomes a neighborhood issue based on certain people who are contributing to the problem. So in the areas that I was experiencing issues, when the awareness level increased to the point where they understood that they were probably the problem rather than being part of the solution, I've had a number of emails and other people in post-town hall meetings saying they no longer have the issue. So it really does start with every homeowner and every resident. And the key components, and public health can share this with all of you to distribute to your ward, the key component is really simple. Don't leave dog feces, don't leave food or water sources, and they won't even remotely consider your property to be attractive to them. So I think that's the thrust of what the message should be, as opposed to suddenly trying to create a budget line for this, because if everybody just did their part, we would solve the problem. Having said that, there are certain issues when it comes to construction where it should be built into the RFP process with the contractor, that we do it proactively rather than reactively. That I agree with, because I've had tens of millions of dollars in sewer reconstruction over the last 15 years, and that definitely is a contributing factor. Every time they start digging, the displacement component, but that's an entirely different ball of wax. But once they do get displaced, if you don't have those food or water sources, they won't come to your home. So that's why it's important to remain vigilant in communicating that rather than trying to find a new budget item to fund. So I just want to emphasize that.
Good points. Thank you very much. So on item 5.2, motion moved by Pearson, seconded by Marula. All in favor? Carried. And item 5.3, Councillor Marula.
Let me start off by first thanking Councillor Collins. This was his initiative when a few months back with respect to bringing this motion forward. Secondly, it's very timely considering what is happening with FASCO. I did meet with with staff and about what the future summit will consist of, and it's something that's really exciting with a number of stakeholders that are going to be involved from local and provincial, and a lot of people are actually contacting my office to be part of that process, including people from Queen's Park, Liberals, Conservatives, and New Democrats, by the way. So clearly, all three parties are understanding the importance of the environment. Having said that, what's really telling about this report is that if you have an assessment of this report, what you're basically seeing is that you have hundreds of complaints and very, very little convictions. If, for instance, the police services were acting in this manner, people would be up in arms. So understanding that there's a different approach between enforcing environmental laws versus that of criminal law, I'll give them that, but the fact that you only have a couple of convictions when you have hundreds and hundreds of complaints, to me suggests, as I mentioned the other night, that the Environment Ministry is more of a consultative engagement process that's an extension of the public relations that's rigged towards the corporate sector rather than community. So clearly, a balanced approach would have seen those numbers pretty reflective of that if, for instance, it was drafted and designed to both represent the needs of community as well as the needs of the corporate sector. Another component is that, ironically, the Ministry of Environment considers Hamilton to be a challenged airshed. And I believe Sarnia and Sudbury are also included in that. So there are only 3 regions in the entire province that have been red flagged as challenged. So if a part of that whole process would be if we could, for instance, create an environment that would be consistent to be having Hamilton, Sarnia, and Sudbury become a pilot project for greater enforcement based on that airshed challenge that they themselves have deemed to be a problem. So ultimately, I think this report, and I again want to thank Councillor Collins because he was ahead of this, and this ties into the need for the policy and legislative changes to ensure that the system is not rigged in favor of the corporate sector, but of the resident, public health, and environment, so that we can become far more sustainable than we presently are. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I think these numbers speak to the whole issue of apathy. There's a lot of apathy for those people who live in some areas of the North End, and certainly those people who live on the beach strip. They just stopped calling the ministry because there was no follow-up to their concerns from a formal perspective as it relates to charges. And so while certainly there have been a lot of investigations, and I can say that every time my constituents call the Ministry for Enforcement, someone does follow up, but invariably the answer is, you know, there's no violations to be had, there's no charges that were laid, and so then people just stop calling. And I think these numbers are important as it relates to, you know, the points that Councillor Marula raised earlier, that, you know, there's an enforcement branch that isn't enforcing the laws of the land as it relates to the environment. And I'm working right now with my constituents on the beach strip for salt complaints that they've had. They clearly have pictures and samples that they've taken where they've called the ministry. The piles aren't covered appropriately on Eastport. The salt makes its way across the street. There's corrosion on people's cars and on their garage doors and other areas of their property. They call the ministry and, you know, they can't determine whether or not all of these issues were caused by the salt piles. And so it's just in one area. It's certainly within line with the piles that are on Eastport. It's not in other areas of the beach strip. And so there's a concern that, again, as it relates to calling the ministry, that there's no recourse for people when there are complaints with industry. And so that's certainly not something that's new. We've dealt with that before. And I think it's important, these numbers are important in that they tell a story, and I think they should be forwarded to all local members of provincial parliament. As Councillor Marula noted last week, excuse me, there is a provincial election on the horizon, and unless this is an election issue, as he noted, I don't expect to see or anticipate seeing much action on it. So if we could send this to all local MPPs and to the 3 leaders, party leaders of the province, maybe it catches someone's attention and the province at some point in time decides to take action, so that when people call, they're not just investigating, they're actually laying charges when and where it's appropriate. So if I could move that at the appropriate time as an amendment,
Okay.
I would do so, seconded by Councillor Marula.
This would be the appropriate time. So on item C, to have this report distributed to all members, all elected members in the Hamilton area. Okay? And leaders, okay. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Carried. On the main motion, 5-3 is amended, all in favor? Carried. On 5-4, the right to a healthy environment, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and you'll remember this being one of my first motions, working with council to be the first municipality to pass the Blue Dot motion, which is the right to a healthy environment. Fantastic work has been done, and there's also, as you see in the Appendix A, an incredible outline put together by Brian and the team there, outlining the stuff that we're already doing to date. And the good news is that there's lots of incredible progressive policies and programs already in place that demonstrates the leadership of this and past councils around this work. And we just heard about it briefly here on the clean air file with Councillors Marula and Collins. But what this does is position us to have embedded in our strategic planning and in all really work moving forward, the metrics that will allow us to report back to the community. So I'm very grateful to staff for putting this together. And you'll know, I'm sure has been indicated, David Suzuki is obviously the David Suzuki Foundation is what started this. Hamilton is the first municipality in Ontario to pass it, and I know Councillor Vanderbeek and Councillor Johnson both worked with me on this file early on, so I'm super happy about that. But mostly, if you take a chance to go through Appendix A, we often hear that we're not doing anything, and so this report indicates the things that we've done as well as the key metrics and key indicators here about how we can continue to move the needle. So although at the time, Mr. Mayor, it might have felt like a motherhood motion, I think this puts into place a central reporting mechanism that not just Hamilton, but I think other municipalities will use as a measuring stick to see where they are on these issues around climate change, which often on its own seems so big and so vast. This breaks it down into small component parts. So I just wanted to make that comment for those that might be watching. Environment Hamilton, certainly, you know, Grant Linney and Chris Parkinson and all the incredible community organizers and 350.org and others who've been looking at this and waiting for the response. It looks to me, Mr. Mayor, the reason why this came back in this way is because it had to take some time to go back and just list all the things that are already happening. So those are my comments on this. I just want to publicly thank staff, Brian and others who have worked on this, and look forward to seeing it in its completion moving forward.
Great, thank you. And there's an upcoming report on item 7.2 on the climate change as well, with some actions that we're already doing, so appreciate that. On that one, moved by Councillor Green, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. I would like to take this moment to warmly welcome Mark Runciman and David Galbraith and Peter Kelly from the Royal Botanical Gardens to come on down. Are you all three of you presenting or just one? Just one, okay, perfect. Come on down, welcome, and speak to us about the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park system and all the great work that's happening there. Right now,
Use this
Councillor?
mouse.
Okay,
Yes.
lovely.
Our pointer isn't working.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honored councillors, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Mr. Runciman and Mr. Kelly, I'd like to express our gratitude for the invitation to address you today. The Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park system, as you know, is an alliance of agencies owning and managing green space and natural areas in Hamilton and Burlington, in the general area of Coutts Paradise Marsh and the Niagara Escarpment, extending east into North Aldershot and Burlington. This alliance of land-owning agencies includes the City of Hamilton, Royal Botanical Gardens, the City of Burlington, Halton Region, the Hamilton Conservation Authority, Conservation Halton, the Bruce Trail Conservancy, the Hamilton Naturalist Club, and McMaster University. Our goal in forming this alliance of agencies is to promote a unified vision for the protection and management of natural spaces in our area, as established in 2009 under our strategic plan, written by these participating agencies with input from public consultations. Our vision for the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park system is that it will be known internationally as a protected, permanent, and connected natural land sanctuary from the harbour to the escarpment that promotes ecosystem and human health within Ontario's Greenbelt. Taken together, the lands owned and managed by the participating agencies amount to nearly 5,000 acres of Conservation Authority lands, city parks, and protected areas such as RBG's nature sanctuaries. These natural lands include some of the richest areas in Canada for wild plant diversity and important ecological corridors which connect large patches of remaining habitat. Following 6 years of preparatory work, the participating agencies formally launched the Eco Park system with the signature of a Memorandum of Understanding in the summer of 2013. That MOU provides us with the basis upon which we collaborate as a group and is overseen by a governing council consisting of the most senior staff members of our respective agencies. Since 2013, the agencies of the Eco Park System Alliance have been able to add approximately 224 acres of newly protected lands to their portfolios. This includes, in 2013, a donation of 37 acres of land in Burlington by the Eileen and John Holland family as a city park on the condition that it be part of the larger context provided by the Eco Park system. In 2015, 100 acres of the Pleasant View Survey in Dundas was purchased by Conservation Halton and Royal Botanical Gardens, with welcome assistance from the Hamilton Community Foundation, City of Hamilton, and Hamilton Conservation Authority, among others. In the discussions that led to the writing of the Memorandum of Understanding, the participating agencies carefully considered the potential for other levels of government to participate in our efforts, and included basic recommendations as to what participation could look like in the memorandum itself. We have been recommending that the potential for several points of engagement be actively pursued. The potential for funding support for our collective stewardship initiatives, ecological restoration, and the promotion and development of sustainable recreational uses for our natural and parkland areas. Funding for securement of additional greenlands to further protect the ecological corridors so vital to maintaining the biological diversity of these lands. Recognition of the area of the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park system as an important contributor to ecosystem services that support our communities and as a special area within Ontario where people benefit from living alongside nature in an urban setting. And exploration for the potential for special purpose legislation or other means to further our objectives of protecting these open spaces, promoting their sustainable recreational use, and restoring natural functions and at-risk species. We are suggesting that the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park system be considered, with the assistance of the provincial and or the federal governments, as a new concept, an urban biosphere eco park, the first of its kind in Canada. An urban biosphere eco park would be a local collaborative effort to protect, connect, or restore natural lands in close proximity to urban areas. This would consist of individual properties that would continue to be owned and managed by the participating agencies. Such a collaboration could include federal, provincial, and municipal governments and other local partners, facilitated by an annual funding formula to include financial contributions from the federal government, provincial government, and local municipal governments and partners. We would like to emphasize that at this time we are only discussing concepts. Local elected representatives in Hamilton and Burlington at both the provincial and the federal levels have repeatedly expressed support for the concept of the eco park system and the urban biosphere eco park, and have also spoken with our individual agencies as to how they might participate. We've had numerous discussions about the form of that participation, which includes ideas such as the province of Ontario simply joining the participating agencies as a member of the eco park system. To further discussions about provincial or federal government participation, the participating agencies have prepared a briefing note that transmits and elaborates the concepts as expressed in the Memorandum of Understanding, which you have in your meeting package, I believe. This note has been shared with a contact group including Minister Eleanor McMahon, the Honourable Ted McMeekin, Minister Karina Gould, Minister Catherine McKenna, and MP Philomena Tassi. We are hopeful that with their respective colleagues and staff, the ongoing discussions will result in a strengthening of the Eco Park System Alliance and greater recognition of this important and novel program in support of both urban nature and human well-being. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Randy. And are there any comments or questions on the delegation? Hearing not, can I have a
Other
motion
than-
to receive the delegation?
Sure, and sir, just before we move that, Mr. Mayor, a great big thank you to the RBG and Mr. Kelly and Mr. Runciman, Dr. Galbraith, for being true leaders in conservation and in the development of our eco-park. It's been very exciting to watch this shape up over the past few years, and it's differently exciting to contemplate what could happen in the future. So a great big thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I think we all agree with that, and it's coming along very nicely. We've all had an element of it at some point or another. Motion to receive, moved by Aidan Johnson, second by Farr. All in favor? Carried. Councillor, you might, well, I think we're done. Thank you, Randy, very much, and Mark,
Thanks.
Peter, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, might I please move a motion to move up 9.1, which is my eco-park motion?
Yeah, and I
Second by
think
Farr.
we're going to deal with that now, so.
Yeah,
Okay,
great.
carry on.
So, colleagues, I'll read out the full motion.
So it's item 9.1 in your package,
Yeah.
in case you're ready.
And colleagues, right after the motion text in your agenda package is the briefing note that's referred to. So the title of the motion is, seconded by Councillor Farr. The title is Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System as a Model for the First Urban Biosphere Eco-Park in Canada. Whereas the Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System is a key environmental initiative relevant to biodiversity protection, climate change readiness, green space conservation, water protection, and overall human health. Whereas the Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System is of significant value from the perspective of economic growth and industry as an opportunity for sustainable ecotourism. Whereas the environmental good of the Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System is entwined with Eco-Park's economic value, given that authentic and desirable economic development is necessarily sustainable economic development. And whereas the accompanying briefing note entitled Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System as a Model for the First Urban Biosphere Eco-Park in Canada maps a promising vision both for Eco-Park and for other legally similar ecosystems in Canada, therefore be it resolved that a letter be sent to the federal and provincial ministers of environment and climate change that includes the following. A, council's support for the document entitled Briefing Note, the Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System, etc., attached as Appendix A. And B, a request for feedback and advice from the ministers regarding next steps toward achieving the vision of Coots to Escarpment Eco-Park System as a model for the first urban biosphere eco-park in Canada. And the arguments are in the whereases, and the explanatory information was provided by our delegation. I'm happy to discuss should colleagues have questions or concerns.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Collins?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not sure who's able to answer this, but it does say in the briefing note that we would support annual funding formula to support Central Secretariat, land stewardship, and rec planning, as well as separate land acquisition. So but it doesn't give a cost. If we're supporting the briefing note, does that mean we're supporting a budget that we don't know what that entails at this point?
Thank you.
Councillor
So
Johnson.
my understanding of that is no, and I wonder if more needs to be said than that. I don't know, but certainly my understanding is no.
That's all. Thank you.
Randy's here. It's a good point. I think maybe we can get it cleared up totally. If you have another minute, Randy, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The concept is just that. It's an idea. We have not proposed any budgets either amongst the partners at the working table that we have or with the other orders of government that we've been discussing. We don't feel that we're in the position yet of knowing what costs would be. We have a signed memorandum of understanding which puts our group together with our existing resources until 2021. We're working under that framework. If the federal or provincial governments feel that there are worthwhile opportunities to explore and support, I think we would, with all of our partner agencies, look at opening up our present operations and see where the costs and savings would be. At this point in time, there is no budget, there's no proposal. It's just a concept acknowledging that these are the participating agencies.
Okay, thank you, Randy.
Thank you for that answer, and I'm certainly supportive of the concept. And I just didn't want to support what's here today, to have somebody come back, sometime in the future to say, well, you supported the briefing note, which meant you supported this financial line or amount, whatever that is in the future. So you've certainly appropriately answered my question, and I thank you for that information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Thank you very much. Councillor Green?
On that vein, I know in the last budget cycle, RBG was here looking to renegotiate the funding model between us and Burlington, if my memory serves me correct. Had that been resolved? Does this in any way open up that conversation and compound the complexity there?
I think it compounds the complexity there, actually. So no, it hasn't been resolved, as I understand it. Mark, do you want to shout it out from there, or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should have just shouted it out. This has nothing to do with our financial arrangement with the City of Hamilton or Robotech Gardens. It's completely separate. We are taking the lead on the, as all the other organizations are doing this, we've taken the lead on it, as David is the manager of the, or the chair of the management board, and I'm the chair of the governance board. They're completely two separate items.
Right.
Thank you for the clarity.
We're all partners in this, actually. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion before you. Thank you, Randy and Mark, for coming in. Much appreciated. And moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you both very much, or all three of you, actually, for coming. And let's make it happen. I think it's a terrific proposal. So where are we, actually?
We're at 7-1.
All right, item 7.1, Public Health Services Risk Management Framework. We have Dr. Elizabeth and Corinne Bernstein here to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to speak from here while Corinne goes down and gets settled in. As you know, looking at risk within an organization is an important thing to do, and we've had Charles working with us as the auditor, looking at it corporately and looking at a risk management framework. At the same time, we have responsibilities to do so for public health services, specifically under the governance standards for public health. So Corinne Berenstein is a senior audit manager from the audit services team of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, and she's been working with public health units across the province to look at how to implement a framework, customizing it a little bit for our understanding. And she's going to present to you today our understanding of the risk management framework, and then staff are going to bring to you next month the risk management plan for public health services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corinne.
Great, thank you very much.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you. So today I'll present a very short presentation on risk management. It's usually 3 days. I understand I don't have 3 days today, but I will speak briefly. And happy to come back if you want more. So the framework that I'm going to talk about today is the Ontario Public Service Framework. So it is a framework that the government, Ontario government, uses for risk management. Charles Brown and I have worked together in the Ontario Internal Audit Division in various, so I think we're aligned, which is good news for everybody. So let's just see. So here's a little bit about me. I have a Bachelor of Physiotherapy, a Master's of Business, Master's of Health. I have a Chartered Accountant degree. I'm a Certified Risk Management Assurance Specialist. I'm a Certified Forensic Investigator. I have a Certificate in Risk Management. And right now I'm taking painting lessons and quilting lessons. A lot more fun.
And your favorite color is?
Was that? Oh, my purple. I'm into purple.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. So I am a senior audit manager with the Health Audit Service team. The Ontario Internal Audit Division is about 200 internal auditors, and I'm with the health team, which means we're responsible for health and all its related agencies. There's about 27 of us, and we're part of the Treasury Board Secretariat. This is how you can reach me. So I wanted to tell you that although I have all that schooling, I really learned about risk management through my children. I have 4 boys born in 5.5 years, and 4 have red hair. And I'm sure we all manage risks every day, but I thought that I would share a few pictures of my kids. And happily now they're 29, 27, 25, and 23, and we have different risks, but I'm not going to show you those. And Okay, so today, if we had 3 days, I would explain all the basic concepts of risk management. I would completely share the Ontario Public Service Risk Management Framework, and I will today talk about Board of Health responsibilities. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. I have been to about 16 public health units, and everyone's at different stages, and I believe that everybody has to take it upon themselves as they are ready and as there is appetite for it. Several public health units have completely implemented risk management, and on the other side, other ones have not, don't even have the capacity to really to entertain the idea of it. And so most are kind of in the middle. So what is risk intelligent? We all want to be risk intelligent, which means the organization thinks holistically about risk. So we don't think about risk in silos. We don't think about it like that, financial risk here and operational risk, but we think of it together. And we have a view of the whole organization, that we know what the top risks are and how they interrelate to each other, how they affect each other. We all speak a common risk language. So when someone says they have a high risk, we understand what that means, how that's going to impact the organization. And it's about looking forward. Risk management is about preparing for the future, anticipating what could go right or could go wrong. It's really about uncertainty. So when you face a major decision, it's a good idea to ask yourself, what risks do I need to manage in order to successfully implement an initiative? So it's about better decision making. It's about alleviating the threats and capitalizing on opportunities, because risk is really positive and negative. We can't afford to have a huge threat. We call our negative risk threats. And we also can't afford to miss capitalizing on a great opportunity. So it's a good idea to think about risk having both sides. So what is the definition of a risk? Risk is really an uncertainty. It's really about something happening in the future that will impact the achievement of your objectives. So this is a newer definition. It used to be hinder the impact of your objectives, but now it's just impact, because again, it could be positive or negative. And the other good thing about this definition is that it ties it to the achievement of objectives. So what's at risk? Risk is not achieving our objectives. So because you can have a big pile of risks, but if it's not impacting your objectives, it shouldn't be tied. So you start with you'll see in the framework, we always start with objectives. Sorry. And again, it could be an opportunity or a threat. So when we talk about risk management basics, we always talk about inherent risk first. So inherent risk is the red square. And what it means is that it's the risk without doing anything. So if the risk is hiring competent staff, and we hire anybody that comes through the door, we probably have a high inherent risk. But the green triangle is the things that we do, staff does, you do to mitigate that risk. So we check references, we have job ads, we do tests, we put people on probation. So there's lots of things we do that will reduce that inherent risk. And then we look at the exposure and we say to ourselves, do we need to do more? Are we doing too much? Is that a risk we can accept? And the key to this is who should accept that risk. And in good board oversight, it's the board that sets the risk appetite. The board says this is how much risk we can tolerate. So you need to have that discussion and say, for example, if it has an impact on employee or client safety, we probably have a very low appetite for risk. And then you'd set a risk appetite for financial risk, so maybe a certain percentage of the budget. So it's about who's going to accept the risk, and do you have that conversation at the right level? And then risk management is a systematic approach to setting the best course of action under uncertainty. So you see, we're going to identify the risks. We're going to assess them in terms of likelihood and impact. We're going to try to understand them. So what makes them worse? What makes them better? What makes them stay the same? Because sometimes what we're doing, we think we're decreasing risk, but we're actually creating bigger risk somewhere else. So it's a good idea to really understand your risks and to act upon them appropriately in the right time frame, the right person at the right time, and then communicating the risk. So how do we communicate that risk to our staff, to our boards, to our constituents? Like, how do we communicate risk? What does the ministry want to know? Who are our stakeholders? So it's about a conversation of risk. So why do we do it? So it does help you improve the outcomes and achievement of objectives. It puts everybody on the same page. So it allows the opportunity for you to ask the public health staff, what about this risk? What about privacy risk? What are you doing? Do we have a high risk there? I see that another public health unit is in the paper about this. Are we exposed to that risk? It allows you to forecast risk, prioritize efforts more effectively. It's about really being prepared. So again, it's proactive, not reactive. We can learn from the past, but there's no point in trying to manage the risks that have already happened. It's about the risks that are before they happen, and it's about due diligence. So as an auditor, we come into public health units and we look to see if you're compliant with the organization's standards. And one of the organization's standards is that the Board of Health is providing effective risk management oversight. So we look at what the board is getting, what kind of risk reports, what kind of conversations. Are they satisfied with the list of risks and the mitigation strategies that are in place? So if there is no documentation, if risk management hasn't come to the board, we can't say that you've fulfilled your due diligence. And when you come in, if an auditor comes in and they look at your risk management, it's documented who was involved, what was considered, and things didn't work out, that risks did happen, they could say, you know, you did the right thing, but new information came, right? But if you don't have it documented, it's hard to justify that you've done a good job. And this pyramid is a reference from Her Majesty's Treasury book, the Orange Book on Risk. Everything is orange. And so it talks about that risk management is important as part of your strategic decisions, more uncertainty at that position. And then as you go down to operations and program design, risk should be considered at all levels of decision making. Okay, roles and responsibilities. I have to take a breath. Okay, the public health unit is responsible for implementing all steps of risk management. They must implement it. The Board of Health has oversight of risk management. So is it being done properly? Are the right risks bringing to the board? Is the mitigation strategies in place? Are resources being used? Do you have a question? Sorry. Oh, okay. The ministry sets standards and organization expectations through organization standards and accountability agreements. The next thing that's really important is a healthy risk culture. That if you have a culture where people cannot identify risk, and they try to identify risk, and they come up and you say, I don't want to talk about it, it's your job to manage it, don't come back till it's done, you do not have a healthy risk culture. So I was a chief intern auditor at Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto, and they have something called Stop the Line, where anybody who sees a risk can stop, no matter if you're a cleaner or you're a physician. Well, in the olden days, you would never challenge a physician. So now we have something called Stop the Line. It's based on the Toyota model. So I would encourage a healthy risk culture, and that's something you would ask the public health unit. What's the culture? How do you know? What steps are you taking to cultivate a healthy risk culture? Okay, so think globally, act locally. We need to understand what is a healthy risk culture, how do we create it, how do we nurture it, how easily it can be destroyed, how do we measure it. So it's sometimes when I do a workshop, I'd say, tell me about an unhealthy work culture. It's easier to talk about an unhealthy work culture where, again, you can't talk about risk, you're punished for taking a risk, you're risk adverse or you overdo everything. Okay, the risk management process, 5 steps. First of all, state your objectives, and then you identify the risks. So you identify the risks in a number of ways, which I'll talk about, and then you assess them. Impact and likelihood, plan and take action, monitor and report. And then it's a continuous quality improvement cycle where we communicate, learn, and improve. Okay, we've created a 2-page placemat which summarizes everything, and you'll see on the right-hand side 13 categories of risks. So when you're identifying the risks in step 2, we want you to think comprehensively about risks. We want you to think, is it compliance or legal risk? Is there equity risk? Is there financial risk, organizational risk, information risk, operational risk, people, resources, political, privacy, security, stakeholders, strategic, technology? So when the public health unit comes to you, and I insist on always using 13 categories, there's actually 14 now because we added environmental risks. You will be assured that they have thought about all categories. And if they haven't, they will talk about that in their presentation. And then after they identify all the risks, we assess them. We say, what is the likelihood? What is the impact? Then we multiply them, impact versus likelihood, and put them on a risk map, where the red risks require urgent attention, the yellow risks are things that you might want to monitor, and the green are risks that are low. And when in a tight resource environment, you might say, well, there's too many green risks, let's move them up a little bit. And it allows you to play with it. And sometimes you're doing things, and you stop doing them, and they stay green. Things have changed, and they remain low. How am I doing? And then the next question is risk reporting and communication. So the high risk, the medium risk, and the low risk, who are you going to communicate to? What has to be communicated to the leadership within the public health unit? What has to be communicated to the board? What has to be communicated to the Ministry of Health and external partners? Board responsibilities: approve the policy and the framework. Make sure it's of high quality. Make sure you understand it. Ensure the board and the staff have the capacity to implement risk management. Make sure all the significant risks facing the public health unit are identified and appropriate mitigation strategies are being proposed. Ensure the board has adequate input into risk discussion. So it's not just a report, but you get and ask questions and you can identify what your concerns are. You make sure the board has adequate information to monitor progress. You want a timeline. You want to know when you're going to get reports. You want to know, are the mitigation strategies been implemented according to the risks. You want to know what the effectiveness of mitigation strategies. You want to know if there's new risks. You hear about things happening at the ministry, new organizational standards. How does that affect our risks? Budget cuts, how does that affect our risks? In summary, risk is uncertainty. Risk includes both threats and opportunities to our objectives. Risk is everywhere, but we're already managing risk. Public health staff are risk managers, but this brings it together in a formal framework and brings it to the board holistically. Risk can be shaped and transformed, but not totally eliminated. We do not have the resources to totally eliminate risks. Risk is a systematic approach for dealing with uncertainty. Risk is useful at home and on the job. Risk management is a key component to good management. Everyone has a responsibility to manage risks. Any questions?
Thank you very much. A big topic, but crisply presented. Thank you so much. Is that your son again?
Yes, he wants to know how I did that.
But he didn't do that. He's not that
It's not
great.
him, but it looks exactly like him.
Yeah, very good. On questions, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Corinne. Certainly a very comprehensive risk assessment, I think, would have been, or could be, in addition to our strategic planning and direction from a corporate-wide perspective. But looking at the particular to the Board of Health, you know, when you say risk, I hear thinking of, you know, the Ebola outbreak, some of the major crises that hit, and what would you do about it, kind of on a framework of a crisis response. And I notice here in the 13 categories of risk, as it pertains like to public health, is there a way maybe in a future report, or maybe through staff, or maybe I missed something in terms of how this board versus corporate-wide response might be responsible, just to give a little bit of connectivity there?
Well, I think what has to happen is if there's a corporate response, you have to carve out the roles and responsibilities for all parties, and to make sure that each party, you know, has identified the risks that they are responsible for. And sometimes when we do a risk assessment, we identify risks that we have no responsibility for, but we go find that person who's responsible for it and make sure that they have a mitigation plan. And they're reporting back to us if it affects us. So it is about holistically trying to organize it.
I know, if I could follow up with that, Mr. Mayor, and you've done this work, so it'd be great to hear your perspective. I'm not clear that there's one person in particular in this corporation who is responsible for like a crisis response. Like I know in other cities, they'll have a security manager, or, you know, you think about all the things that could happen. I live about 400 meters from a rail line, which every day brings risk through our residential neighborhood. What happens if that's derailed? What happens if we have a SARS that hit Hamilton? What happens if, so all of those things in other municipalities, kind of what are they doing as it relates to that one person who owns the risk and then guides the corporation through it?
I am going to have to refer that to
We have a team, but I
the
don't know if we
team.
have one person.
Dr. Richardson.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I got distracted for 1 second. Could we have the question repeated?
Aha. So the question is, in other municipalities, I'm to understand that there is somebody on staff who is, you know, whether it's other security services, facilities, or what have, they do all the crisis response, and their sole responsibility is to be the point person for like all the disasters or major crises that can happen in a city. Threats, be they by people or by
We do have
by
that.
natural.
So our emergency response team is in place. And there are actually 2 individuals that head that up, and if that's what you're talking about specifically. So when there's an event, any kind of an emergency event, the emergency control team kicks in, all the departments become part of that. We have a command center, and there's actually 2 individuals that make the call to bring everybody in, and then the city manager then ultimately leads the process, but it's the 2 individuals that actually call for it.
Okay,
Dr. Elizabeth, do you want to fill in any blanks that I might have missed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just adding to that, in addition to the citywide response, public health, because we have a specific mandate under emergency response for the health sector, we do also have an emergency response planner, Chris Nagel, who works with us and maintains our emergency response plans, as well as supporting the broader health sector and collaborating with those similar partners within HHS, St. Joseph's Hospital, across the city.
Councillor Green.
I hear that, and I understand that that's under the framework of like natural disasters.
No, well, any kind of emergency, whatever it is, medical or otherwise.
Okay. So you have security listed here. I won't go down the rabbit hole. I'll take it up later.
Okay.
It would have been maybe perhaps interesting for me in that framework that if those people, you know, were present to this conversation as they are the managers of
I
risk.
totally agree with you. I think like that's the type of presentation you should ask for. I want to know more about how we are prepared for that. And I think that the staff would be open to that. They would say, you know, this is how we do it. Elizabeth.
Yep, Dr. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Understanding the question goes broader than just the natural disasters into all those other events. You know, there's many people that does get into managing risk, which, as Corinne pointed out early on, that is a lot of what public health does within the community, within its work. And so when we're thinking about it from an organizational standpoint around these specific issues, that's the plan that we're going to be coming back to you with in the risk assessment piece as well, around what do we see are the top risks for our organization moving forward, and what are our plans to mitigate those risks, to decrease those risks as much as we possibly can. So hopefully we'll have a lot of further answers in November when we come back to the Board of Health. I think if there's some specific ones, as you've identified, you know, when it comes to issues of natural disaster, it comes to issues of security, we won't go into that level of detail with this presentation, or just as Corinne said, these become very long workshops that go on and on. But if there are other areas of specific interest that we could know about today, or that you might have after you see that presentation, then we'd be happy to prepare those as well.
Councillor Green.
I guess thank you for I've toured the facility, I see it, and I'm aware of that. And I just think this is a very comprehensive audit that gives us a really good framework to bring, you know, whatever next step is available to us. And so that's what I'm interested in, and certainly appreciate this here before us today, and would like to see maybe a broader corporate-wide report back, and I'll look forward to that, and hopefully you'll be joining us again to provide that kind of context. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it'd be worthwhile for council to have an update as to the emergency control system and all the elements of it, and when it kicks in, and who responds and who participates. I mean, that's available. I don't think we've had that at any point during this term of council, other than individually, not collectively.
And there are elements that are missing there.
Yep.
And you'll see that when it does report back, you'll see major elements that have been listed here in a very periphery way that I don't see being across the corporation. So I'll look forward to raising those issues at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Jackson, then Councillor Marula.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Corin, thank you so much. I could imagine how fascinating and interesting a weekend conference would be with you and various plenary sessions and that, expanding on what you've shown us today. I've always felt we've had a great working relationship with our public health department and under the 20-year plus leadership of Dr. Richardson and her team. But I've also been educated over the years that the medical officer of health has extraordinary powers similar to the chief of police, is the way I've learned and been told, Mr. Mayor. And so managing risk when the medical officer of health may have to call upon her emergency powers and authority given a situation in our city, how do we necessarily reconcile that from a Board of Health standpoint as governance versus the extraordinary powers that an MOH has? Can you possibly comment on that, please?
Corinne?
I don't think I can comment, but can Dr. Elizabeth, can you?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If I understand the question, it's how do we reconcile the fact that I am able to make some decisions or to direct some actions? And, you know, one of the ones that was infamously perhaps so was West Nile virus, when it was debated across all the communities in Ontario about that relationship. And so there are some situations from a health perspective where using professional judgment and you know, very detailed analyses that happen, that I am able to instruct for some things to happen. But that is a very limited number of circumstances where that might apply. And, you know, I think, as you know, as we've discussed over the years, those powers would only be used as a last resort, where there wasn't some way we could come to an understanding that this was the best course forward. And I'm very proud to say we've never had to go there. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. And I was just looking to the independent facilitator in terms of, because her theme was risk and how to manage risk, and where the Board of Governors, as in Board of Health, come in. So I kind of expected that answer, Dr. Richardson, and I concur totally. So I was just looking possibly for maybe some insight from Corin in terms of teaching risk across various organizations and municipalities as well. Lastly, Mr. Mayor, we have our own risk management department corporately of the City of Hamilton. So do you see public health services part and parcel consulting with them, working with them?
Absolutely.
Or again, do you see public health kind of an entity on its own, Corin?
Well, you know, when we talk about risk holistically, right, we talk about, you know, it involving their stakeholders, and you don't want two different frameworks. And I think, Charles, did you want, actually Charles and I, as I said, work together, and I think you're going to be working at a corporate-wide level, and it's at the same framework, so, you know, so it'll be easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just on the point that Councillor Green brought up, which I think years ago what they used to do when you became deputy mayor, someone from fire or police or what have you would come visit you and explain to you that if you ever, in the event that the mayor was out of town or whatever, and a state of emergency needed to be called, what that process would be. We don't do that any longer. So it might be something that we might want to consider reintroducing, just so that we all have an understanding of what that process is.
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, that's why I think it'd be worthwhile for us to have a session about the whole emergency response system and what roles and responsibilities there are. So I think you're spot on. So I'll take that as direction and organize a session for all of council. Councillor Murray?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember the individual's name because he was very enthusiastic about it, incredibly enthusiastic about the power of that state of emergency type of thing, and almost. It was actually kind of, it was very entertaining at the time.
We have a couple of individuals, name escapes me right now, that are very passionate about the emergency control system. Yeah. They're working it all the time.
So maybe if we want to reintroduce that for deputy mayors, that'd be great.
I will do that.
All right, thank you.
I just love when that happens. I love when we have that conversation where, you know, real time you identify a need like that. So that's awesome.
Great. Any further questions of Dr. Bernstein? Hearing not, thank you very much for your presentation, and my condolences to your children. I hope they're all right. A motion to receive the presentation and moved by Councillor Skelly, second by Councillor Green. All in favor? A motion on the to receive the report, moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. On item 7.2, so a reminder again that page 4 of the report has been amended, and a copy of that is in your changes package. Who is going to be making that presentation today?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to introduce Trevor Imhoff. Trevor is a coordinator with the Air Quality and Climate Change Cluster within Public Health Services Health Hazards Program.
Great.
Trevor is the co-author of the report you have before you and will lead the presentation this afternoon. Thanks,
Terrific.
Trevor.
Thank you very much. Trevor, welcome.
Thank you.
You might want to move that microphone up a little bit, adjusting for size and height. No offense.
No problem. I also have a deep voice too, and it projects a lot, so I can actually probably stand back from the mic, in fact. But through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for having me.
The microphone, though, is useful for the folks that are picking up the meeting and that are broadcasting this, so be useful to use notwithstanding, but I can hear you loud and clear.
This is the previous presentation. Sorry.
My apologies.
No worries. There we go. Perfect.
Same thing.
Thank you. All right.
Trevor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for having me. Again, my name is Trevor Imhoff. I'm the Air Quality and Climate Change Coordinator within the newly formed Healthy Environments within Hamilton Public Health Services. And I'm very happy today to be here to provide you with a very brief and high-level update on the greenhouse gas inventory within the City of Hamilton, as well as Hamilton's actions on climate change. So the first slide here, you've probably recognized it from last year. I was here updating the Board of Health on the 2014 inventory. This is the most recent 2015 greenhouse gas inventory. So as you can see from using 2006 as the baseline, you can see from 2006 to 2013, 2012, you can see a gradual decline in greenhouse gas emissions. From 2013 to 2014, there was a gradual increase in greenhouse gas emissions, and this was previously hypothesized to be due to the very cold winters we had and the increase in electricity pricing resulting from people switching from electricity, which is a very low carbon content because primarily in Ontario, it's made up of nuclear as well as hydroelectric, and so they switch from electricity due to the high prices to natural gas, which is a higher carbon content. We are, luckily, in 2015, back on track to which we have achieved the 2020 greenhouse gas reduction targets. As you can see, the largest emitters continue to be our industrial sources. The largest emitters who emit more than 25,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e, are excluded from the industrial emissions because under federal law, they have to report to the National Pollutant Release Inventory, NPRI, and they can be shown in the steel sector in the red bar graphs above. So not including industrial sources, the largest emissions continue to be within the City of Hamilton, transportation, followed by residential, then commercial, and with less than 0.5% of total emissions, agriculture, water, and waste. So the table above is the percent reductions. Under the Climate Action Plan that was endorsed by Board of Health in 2015, we set community greenhouse gas reduction targets for 20% by 2020, 50% by 2030, and 80% by 2050. I'm happy to say here that we have met our 2020 targets, and we're currently sitting at 20.2% of total community greenhouse gas reductions. So the table also lists in order the most reductions that we've seen for the past 4 years, with solid waste and water reduction being the most. This is attributed to green technology, such as cogeneration at our Woodwood treatment plant, as well as alternative green technologies in terms of our Hamilton Water, which is the high lift pump as well. Unfortunately, the only sector that has not reduced emissions is the transportation sector, as you can see in this table. emissions have gradually increased, with the largest increase for the reporting year of 2015, with an increase of 9.6% since 2006. So city staff, using Statistics Canada Ontario vehicle registration data, has taken that data and prorated it based on Hamilton's population per vehicle class. And as you can see in the pie graph above, the largest percent of emissions of the total transportation emissions, which is just over 1.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent, is light road vehicles, which make up approximately 75.8%. So this is clearly evidence for the need to further improve and promote and educate on the other modes of active and sustainable transportation. Recently, through the federal as well as the provincial government agencies, they have released a large supply of funding, specifically at the federal level through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. They have released funding that can be used for multiple streams, including studies, pilot projects, capital works, asset management, updating. As you can see in the table on the column on the furthest right, the amounts vary, typically depending on the project, but roughly it's about 80% of the project you can get funded up to a maximum of $175,000. Per project. And the good thing about the FCM funding, it's stackable, so you could apply for multiple streams of funding for one project, which is a very cool aspect of the FCM funding. Also, more recently, the province of Ontario, through their cap and trade revenue auctions, have released the Ontario Municipal GHG Challenge Fund, which offers to fund up to 100% of a project, up to a maximum of $10 million per project. So right now, the Energy Initiatives Office is taking the lead on that and collecting a list of applications that the City of Hamilton will apply for to acquire some of that funding. And so just some very high-level actions and very cool work that the Air Quality and Climate Change team have been working on. The first is the Bay Area Climate Change Partnership Office. In June 2016, staff were given direction through the mayor's motion to create a governance model similar to the Bay Area Restoration Council and the Bay Area Implementation Team. At the 2017 Bay Area Economic Summit, our Mayor Eisenberger, and the Mayor of Burlington, Mayor Goldering, announced the creation of the Bay Area Climate Change Partnership with Mohawk College. This cutting-edge collaboration between the two municipalities and Mohawk College will physically be located in the new Joyce Center for Partnership and Innovation, which is the region's first net zero institutional building. So the framework for this partnership office has three entities. The first one is the Bay Area Climate Change Council, and this is an advisory reporting watchdog council that will be made up of community stakeholders only, to help guide the efforts and initiatives of the other entities within the partnership office. The second is the Bay Area Climate Change Coordinating Office. This will be comprised of municipal staff to help to provide secretarial functions, not only for the council, but as well as for the implementation team. And finally, the Bay Area Implementation Team will be made up of subject matter experts comprised of municipal, provincial, federal staff that will help actually implement the actions as outlined in the Climate Action Plan. And so next, recently, the entire city of Hamilton joined Sustainable Hamilton Burlington. And one of the projects Sustainable Hamilton Burlington runs in partnership with ClimateWise is this very cool project called the Business Energy and Emissions Profile, or BEEP for short. This program uses a unique approach using the North American Industry Classification Codes, along with ClimateWise's patented approach to engage small to medium-sized commercial businesses to begin analyzing, measuring, and to be able to effectively address their GHG emissions. The City of Hamilton also received a grant from ICLEI's Train the Trainer program to deliver workshops to to the community on climate change adaptation planning, including vulnerability and risk assessment. Staff continues to engage with the community on climate adaptation planning to gain insights on risk and to help improve the community's resiliency, which is the ability to react and to recover from extreme stressors that can damage our social, built, and natural infrastructure. And finally, other city highlights on climate change that we can't ignore is the great work that the Planning and Economic Development Department is working on in terms of creating a terms of reference for a community energy plan, as well as the energy conservation projects that the city housing is working on, and finally the great low-impact development projects across the city that Hamilton Water is leading on that. And thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Questions from members of Council, Board of Health? Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. So the graph that you've presented here on, looks like page 2, yeah, not 100% clear. So you have them each year. Is there a cumulative, or is that the percentage that they have of the total?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green, that is a breakdown of each sector.
Right.
So that is their attributed value for each sector, and combine them all, then that's their cumulative emissions.
So 2006, right there before us, industrial, I don't know, is up there at 120.
Yes.
Steel's at 80, so it's 80 on top of the 120.
Yes.
So we don't, so, okay. Is there somewhere else that it's presented in cumulatively? Did I miss that? With the real numbers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green, the full cumulative numbers is found in the report. Let me, if I can just quickly go through this.
I rifled through it, but colors work just fine too with bar graphs. I get a little bit confused on that one there. Nope, that's not it. I thought I only saw percentages, but I could have missed it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green, I do know that is in the report. I'm just having trouble finding it right now, but we can touch base afterwards, and I can give you the full cumulative emissions for the entire community. It's somewhere around like 100, it's somewhere around, and I don't want to speculate, but it's somewhere around 16 million tons of emissions per year, or just over that in terms of our cumulative emissions. And so we use the 2006 baseline, which was approximately 20% more. So that 16 million tons of CO2 is for the 2015 number. And so the 2006 number would approximately be 20.2% more than the 2015 number, which I outlined in the report.
What was the event in 2012? And it may be, again, outlined that I just missed. Was it an industrial shutdown? Why the dip there, and why the trendward back up?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green. That is a good question. Our chair of Cleaner Hamilton, Dennis Corr, also kind of tries to describe that as well. So this was a result of a lot of automation that occurred within the industrial field, which can be attributed to their overall emission reduction, as well as in terms of the technology that industry implemented throughout those years will help realize what is the main reason for those emission reductions up until 2012. And that also helped with the weather helped with decreasing those emissions as well, because you can see from 2012 to 2014, there is a kind of a slight increase, and that is due to a unusually cold winter, which was confirmed by other municipalities as well. We supply all of our emission data to the Carbon Disclosure Project, which then we can see other municipalities' emissions, and other municipalities kind of realize that same upward trend and then back down due to that cold winters in 2013 and 2014.
I guess what challenges me there is that the unpredictability of climate change. It could be the case that we have these Arctic vortexes that continue, that create higher emissions, and it appears that even though there's a slight downward trend in 2015, based anecdotally on some of the things that I'm hearing about as it relates to site-specific exemptions, they're included in this, right? Site-specific exemptions for some of the industrial, they're not excluded from this data?
Trevor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green, yes, they are included in this data. The large emitters that would need that site-specific standards would be considered in the steel sector in the red bar there.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that is that if we wanted a 20% and we hit it early, and then we go, to 30% and then 50%, and this plateaus, is there an assumption then that kind of the advanced technology will continue to remediate some of these processes, that will become smarter at the way that we do manufacturing or the way that we do transportation or in the other things? Or like what's the 10-year horizon post 2015?
Trevor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Green. There is the assumption, and unfortunately the municipality has no control over the industrial emissions or the technology they implement, but through the committee that I coordinate, Cleaner Hamilton, we've had some presentations from other organizations aimed at kind of bridging or implementing those technological advancements to industry to help them reach. One of them is called OCE, the Ontario College. Perhaps, I can't remember the acronym right now, but there are organizations like that that will aim to try to implement those green technologies to reduce emissions. In terms of a municipality standpoint, we do have control over the built environment, such as transportation, commercial, and residential sectors. So implementing programs that other municipalities have, such as a HERO or energy retrofit loan type of program, would help to reduce those emissions that we can control.
I appreciate that. I know it's complex, Mr. Mayor. We heard before us.
Touch your microphone.
We heard before us a pretty comprehensive assessment of risk, 13 categories. Ecological was not listed in that, and I would like to say that with you being present with this presentation, I would hope that whatever staff member is going to be taking forward this risk assessment management tool, that they include ecological risk as a third, if not, or 14th, if not first primary risk that we're facing here, given what's been put before us today. So I appreciate this and appreciate the work of staff around all environmental issues. I know it's outside really the purview of municipalities to go as far as we do, but I think it's time and money well invested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions of Trevor? Hearing not, thank you, Trevor, for your great presentation, actually. And yeah, I could hear you loud and clear, for sure.
Thank you very much.
So much. A motion to receive the report, moved by Green, seconded by Collins. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to receive the presentation, moved by Green, seconded by Eden Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Again, thank you, Trevor. Well done. On item 8.1, the potential local public health restructuring, Dr. Elizabeth Richardson. We have a copy in the report in terms of the communique that you intend to send and an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry again for the late arrival of this final copy for everybody. As you know, this is a response to the expert panel. The expert panel was convened by the province to look at one area of the many areas that have been looked at for public health services modernization, and that was to look at the structure of local public health in Ontario. So they released their report, they reported to the minister back in June, and the minister released their report publicly in July. The ministry's made no commitment to the report or to following the actions that are outlined in the report, but sent it out for comment nonetheless. So in reviewing the report, we've had the opportunity to sit with representatives from the Association of Local Public Health Association, to work with the Council of Medical Officers of Health, and as well we've had input in terms of reviewing AMO's health task force. In looking at the responses that were planned to be submitted, you'll see that they're fairly similar to what we've put together as the particular points for Hamilton. Ours was informed by a discussion at Governance Committee with Councillor Pearson, Councillor Partridge, and Councillor Vanderbeek, and as well by a discussion as outlined in the report that we had sent back in August when the report came out, discussion with the Mayor as the Chair of Board of Health, our two public health champions, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Whitehead, and as well, Councillor Pearson was invited to the meeting but unable to attend. So but she'd seen the report previously as Chair of Governance. So we've put together the issues here. We have taken particular note of a few things, and I'm just flipping back. I've gotten myself out of line here, alignment. But looking at the degree of restructuring that is suggested, which is very significant, there would be significant cost and significant disruption with such a degree of restructuring. With talking through with those members and gathering their opinions, there is great concurrence with what AMO and COMO had submitted. We don't have alphas yet, but we expect it will be similar. And we needed to get this in by the submission deadline of October 31st. So looked at how this meets with the challenges that are in public health. And we want to be very clear. I think I would suggest to you as a Board of Health, you would want to be very clear that it's not about objecting to change. It is about understanding that public health does have room as a system in Ontario, including in this particular region, has room to grow and continue to get better and better. And we definitely are on board for doing that, and outlines a number of ways in which that can be accomplished, including the implementation of the new standards, the new working relationship that we have with the LHIN, and here in Hamilton with our anchor table, and as well looking at further opportunities here to improve our services without taking on the wholesale changes. Maintaining local responsiveness is an absolutely critical one that was discussed in all of those venues. The issue of the board member's voice or our council's voice at a regional board, if it was to be put in place, is one that has been of concern to many across the province. As you know, when we think about health in our community, we think about many things that contribute to health. We know that housing does, we know that income does, we know that healthcare does, we know that many things do. But it's to say, as this expert panel did, which was the relationship with the healthcare system is the one that they are trying to align most closely, as opposed to our relationships with the municipality, with other partners, the boards of education, all sorts of partners within the community. Our concern is that there would be some removal of that relationship by regionalizing further. So there's much more said within here. I won't go into further detail. I will note that boundaries within the province are a significant issue elsewhere. They weren't as much one here, except insofar as the local voice really came up in terms of an organization that covered a larger territory. So that's my summary. If anybody else who was in those meetings, I'm sure may have other things to highlight, but I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you. I think the report's pretty self-evident, but any other comments from members of Board of Health? Hearing not, a motion to approve the report, and obviously sending it off to the ministry, moved by Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Dr. Elizabeth, thank you for that was a lot of work, actually. I know that these opinions were well vetted and well thought out and well researched by you and your team, so I appreciate all the work and effort that went into that. We just get the end of the report, but there's a lot of background work that went into this, so much appreciated. Dr. Elizabeth.
And if I could, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. I'd just like to recognize Jen Hall, because she is the one who is that does all this writing behind these initiatives. You'll see it as well with the risk management plan. She's done work on that, as well as Chris Nagel's been helping out with that piece. But Jen has done a tremendous amount of work writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting this to get it to the point where it was today. And so thank you very much to Jen.
Okay, well, thanks to them and all, for sure. Thank you very much. A motion to look at the outstanding business list or approve it as is, moved by Pearson, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Is there any other business? Hearing not, a motion to adjourn would be appropriate. Moved by Brenda Johnson, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Carried. Thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon.